she was just supposed to pour the wine and disappear into the wallpaper. That's the rule at the Obsidian, the city's most dangerous supper club. But when the most feared man in the underworld, Zevran Witshaw, brought his impossible-to-please Russian mother to dinner, the staff was terrified. One mistake meant death. But when a quiet waitress named Leora opened her mouth to speak, she didn't just save the night. She revealed a secret so dark it silenced the entire room. You won't believe what happened next. The air inside the Obsidian was never truly still. It vibrated with a low-frequency hum, the sound of money moving in silence and violence waiting in the wings. It was a dry, stifling atmosphere, hermetically sealed from the world outside. Here, the seasons didn't matter. It could be snowing or burning in the city streets, but inside, the climate was controlled to a sterile, chilling 68 degrees. Leora Faircrest adjusted the collar of her uniform, a severe black dress that buttoned to the chin. The fabric scratched at her neck, a constant reminder of her station. She stood at the service station, polishing a wine glass until the crystal sang under the friction of the linen cloth. She checked the rim for spots, holding it up to the amber light of the vintage chandeliers. Perfection was not a goal here. It was a survival mechanism. "Faster, Faircrest. You're polishing that glass like you're trying to read your future in it," Merelda Ashwell snapped, gliding past with a clipboard clutched against her chest like a shield. Merelda was the floor manager, a woman whose beauty was marred only by the permanent sneer of dissatisfaction etched around her mouth. She thrived on the anxiety of the staff, feeding on it like a vampire. "It had a smudge, Merelda," Leora replied, her voice soft, barely carrying over the clinking of silverware from the dining floor. "Mr. Goldheart complains if the crystal isn't immaculate." Merelda stopped, pivoting on a heel that looked sharp enough to puncture a lung. "Adrian Goldheart is in the East Wing tonight. He's the least of your worries. We have a VIP booking in the main alcove, Table 1. Leora felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. Table 1 was reserved for the apex predators. It sat on a raised dais, shrouded by heavy velvet curtains that offered privacy, while still allowing the occupants to look down upon the rest of the room. It was a throne. "Who?" Leora asked, though she knew better than to ask questions. "Zevran Witshaw." Merelda whispered the name, looking around as if saying it too loud would summon a demon. "And he's bringing her." Leora's hands didn't shake, a testament to years of discipline that she kept hidden beneath a facade of mediocrity. "His mother?" "Katriana," Merelda confirmed, a look of genuine terror crossing her eyes. "The last time she was here, she made a busboy cry because the ice in her water clinked too loudly. She said it sounded like cheap glass. Novella is already having a panic attack in the walk-in freezer. You're taking the lead on the table." "Me?" Leora protested, though her face remained impassive. "Novella has seniority. Novella drops things when she shakes. You don't," Merelda said, her eyes narrowing. "You're like a statue, Faircrest. Sometimes it's creepy, but tonight creepy is good. Just pour, serve, and don't speak unless spoken to. And for the love of God, don't look the mother in the eye. They say she can smell fear." Merelda marched off, barking orders at a terrified runner. Leora set the glass down. She looked across the expansive dining room. The patrons were filtering in, men in bespoke suits that cost more than Leora made in a year, accompanied by women who glittered with diamonds and danger. In the corner, she spotted Bennett Crestwood, a man known for laundering money through art galleries, laughing loudly with a senator. But Leora wasn't looking at them. Her gaze drifted to the empty Table 1. She knew of Zevran Witshaw. Everyone did. He was the tectonic plate upon which the city's criminal underworld rested. If he moved, the city shook. And his mother. Rumors painted her as the surviving matriarch of a fallen Russian dynasty, a woman who had survived purges and wars that erased entire bloodlines. Leora touched the small, crescent-shaped scar hidden behind her ear, a nervous habit she thought she had broken. She wasn't just a waitress trying to pay rent. She was a ghost in a machine, hiding in plain sight. Serving Zevran Whitshaw was dangerous, not because of what he might do, but because of what he might see. The kitchen doors swung open, and Novella stumbled out, her face blotchy from crying, clutching a tray of appetizers. "I can't do it, Leora," Novella hissed, her voice trembling. "I heard Yestin Moorhart is coming too. If Yestin and Zevran are in the same room, it's going to be a bloodbath. I can't be in the crossfire. I have a cat." "Breathe, Nov," Leora said, taking the tray from her hands to steady it. "Yestin is sitting in the mezzanine. They won't cross paths if we do our jobs right. Just stick to the side stations. I'll take the main floor." "You're saving my life," Novella exhaled, looking at Leora as if she were a saint. "Wait, why aren't you scared? Do you not know who Katriana is? They say she once poisoned a man's tea while smiling at him." "I know who she is," Leora said, her expression unreadable. "She's just a customer, Novella, and tonight the customer is always right." But as Leora turned to head onto the floor, the heavy oak doors of the restaurant entrance groaned open. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The chatter stopped. The clinking of cutlery ceased. Zevran Whitshaw had arrived. Zevran Whitshaw did not walk. He occupied space. He moved with a predatory fluidity, a man comfortable in his own skin, only because he knew he could shed the skin of anyone who opposed him. He wore a charcoal suit, cut sharp to accentuate the width of his shoulders, and a black shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, revealing a glimpse of a tattoo that snaked up his throat. His eyes were dark, scanning the room not with curiosity, but with the tactical assessment of a soldier entering a combat zone. But for all his imposing presence, he was currently playing the role of a dutiful son. On his arm was Katriana. She was a striking woman, radiating a terrifying elegance. She wore a heavy coat of silver fur, despite the climate-controlled warmth, and walked with a cane, topped with an obsidian wolf's head. Her hair was stark white, pulled back into a severe bun that pulled the skin of her face tight, accentuating high, aristocratic cheekbones. She didn't look at the room, she looked through it. The silence in the restaurant was heavy, suffocating. Leora stood by the service station, her back straight, watching the procession. Behind Zevran trailed 2 bodyguards, their movements synchronized and silent. Merelda was immediately at the door, bowing lower than Leora had ever seen her bow. "Mr. Whitshaw, Madame, we are honored. Your table is prepared." Zevran gave a curt nod, his attention focused on helping his mother navigate the few steps to the main floor. "The corner?" he asked, his voice a deep baritone that carried without effort. "Of course. Table 1. Maximum privacy," Merelda assured him, sweating slightly. As they moved through the room, Leora noticed the reactions of the other powerful men. Bennett Crestwood suddenly found his salad very interesting. The senator stopped laughing. Even Adrian Goldhart, usually brash and loud in the East Wing, signaled his waiter to pour wine silently. The hierarchy was clear. Zevran was the king, and Katriana was the queen mother who had raised him to be a killer. Leora took a deep breath, picked up the water pitcher and the menus, and approached the table. She waited until Zevran had pulled out the chair for his mother. Katriana sat with a sigh, arranging her furs around her like armor. She placed her cane against the table edge with a decisive thud. "Water!" Zevran commanded, not looking at Leora. He remained standing until his mother was comfortable. Leora moved in. "Good evening. Sparkling or still?" "Still," Zevran said. "No ice for her. 3 cubes for me." Leora poured with practiced precision. She could feel Zevran's eyes on her hands, watching for a tremor, a mistake. She didn't give him one. She placed the crystal glass on a coaster, ensuring no condensation would touch the mahogany table. Then she turned to Katriana. The older woman was inspecting the silverware, running a gloved finger over the tines of a fork. "The silver is cold," Katriana said. Her voice was raspy, heavily accented, carrying the weight of decades of harsh winters and harsher cigarettes. It wasn't just Russian, it was guttural, deep. "Why is the silver cold?" Merelda, hovering nearby, stepped forward, her face pale. I apologize, madame. The air conditioning." Katriana ignored Merelda and looked up at Leora. Her eyes were a piercing, icy blue, clouded slightly with age but sharp with malice. "You, girl, warm the spoon." "Mother," Zevran warned softly, sitting down. "Don't start." "I start nothing," Katriana snapped at her son, speaking English but with a cadence that twisted the vowels. "I want hot tea. If I stir hot tea with cold spoon, it steals the heat. It is physics, Zevran. You would know this if you finished university instead of running around with guns." Leora didn't blink. "I will bring a fresh spoon that has been warmed, madame. And the tea menu." "I do not need menu." Katriana waved a hand dismissively. "You have nothing I want. You have dust in bags. I want even chai, fireweed. Do you have this? No. You have Earl Grey." She said Earl Grey like it was a curse word. "We have a private reserve of loose leaf," Leora said calmly. "I can prepare a blend of black tea with a hint of smoked pine. It is not fireweed, but it carries the memory of a wood stove." Zevran's head snapped up. He looked at Leora for the first time, really looked at her. His eyes narrowed. It was a poetic description, unusual for a waitress at a place where staff usually just recited the specials robotically. Katriana stared at Leora, her lips thinning. "Memory of a wood stove," she mocked, though the hostility in her eyes dimmed by a fraction. "You are a poet now? Bring me this memory. If it tastes like ash, I will have you fired." "Understood," Leora said, bowing her head slightly. She retreated to the kitchen. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, but her face remained a mask of professional indifference. "How is it going?" Novella whispered, hiding behind the espresso machine. "Is anyone dead?" "Not yet," Leora murmured, grabbing a canister of lapsang souchong and a milder black tea to cut the smokiness. She began the ritual of brewing, warming the pot, warming the spoon, timing the steep to the second. Back in the dining room, the tension was ratcheting up. Yestin Morhart had descended from the mezzanine. He was a wild card, younger than Zevran, reckless, with a smile that looked like a knife wound. He was walking toward the exit, but his path took him dangerously close to table 1. Leora exited the kitchen with the tea tray just as Yestin paused near Zevran's table. "Zev?" Yestin grinned, his hands in his pockets. "And Madam Witshaw. Lovely to see you out of the fortress." Zevran didn't stand. He picked up his water glass, his knuckles white. "Keep walking, Yestin." "Just paying respects," Yestin chuckled, his eyes darting to Katriana. "Heard the old heart was giving out. Glad to see you're still upright." It was a direct insult, a challenge. The room went silent. Zevran's hand moved toward the inside of his jacket. The bodyguards tensed. Katriana let out a sharp laugh. "My heart will outlast your liver, boy. Keep walking before my son decides to redecorate the floor with your teeth." Yestin's smile vanished. He stepped closer. "Careful, old woman." Leora was there. She didn't stop. She walked straight into the kill zone, placing the tray down on the service stand with a deliberate, loud clatter that broke the standoff. "Your tea, madam," Leora announced, her voice cutting through the testosterone-fueled silence like a bell. She stepped between Yestin and the table, effectively using her body as a shield, though she made it look like she was simply reaching for the teapot. Yestin glared at her. "Move, waitress." Leora turned to him, holding the silver pot. "I'm in the middle of service, sir. The exit is 5 steps to your left." It was an insane risk. No one spoke to Jestin Morhart that way. Mirelda gasped from the shadows. Zevrin looked at Leora with a mixture of confusion and intense calculation. Jestin stared at her, then scoffed. The tension broke. Right. Enjoy the tea. He stormed out, the heavy doors slamming behind him. Leora turned back to the table, her hands steady as she poured the amber liquid. She placed the pre-warmed spoon on the saucer. "The tea, madame," Leora said softly. Catriona didn't look at the tea. She looked at Leora. "You are either brave or stupid, girl. He would have hurt you." "He was interrupting dinner," Leora replied simply. Catriona picked up the cup. She took a sip. She paused. She took another sip. The silence stretched. Zevrin watched his mother, waiting for the explosion. "It is acceptable," Catriona conceded. "It smells of winter." Leora exhaled internally. She had survived round one. The dinner proceeded with the fragility of walking on thin ice. Leora was summoned back and forth, fetching condiments, refilling water, removing crumbs. She became invisible again, a mechanic keeping the machine running. The main course arrived, venison with a juniper reduction. Zevran ate in silence, his eyes constantly scanning the room, checking the exits, watching the hands of the other patrons. He was a man who never truly rested. Catriona, however, was becoming agitated again. She poked at the venison. "It is tough," she complained loudly. "Like shoe leather. In the old country we hung the meat for a week. This was killed this morning and thrown on a fire." "It's the finest cut, mother," Zevran said, his patience wearing thin. "Please, eat." "I do not eat garbage," she hissed. She looked around for a target and found Novella, who had unfortunately drifted too close to refill a neighboring table's wine. "You!" Catriona pointed her cane at Novella. "Come here." Novella froze, her eyes widening in panic. She shuffled over, trembling, visible even from a distance. "Yes, madame." "This meat," Catriona gestured with her fork. "Who cooked this? A child? Tell the chef he is a disgrace. Tell him I said he should be feeding dogs, not people." I will tell him," Novella stammered, tears welling up. "I'm so sorry, madam." "Sorry does not fix the meat." Catriona raised her voice. "Look at me when I speak to you. Why do you shake? Are you on drugs? Look at her, Zevran. She shakes like a junkie." "Mother, stop," Zevran growled, slamming his hand down. "Enough." "No, I pay, I expect service." Catriona was working herself into a frenzy, her face flushing red. She switched to Russian, shouting rapidly at Novella, who didn't understand a word but began to cry openly. Catriona's words were vicious, insulting Novella's intelligence, her appearance, her lineage. It was a brutal, verbal assault. The entire restaurant was watching. Mirelda was paralyzed with fear. Zevran looked ready to drag his mother out physically, his face a mask of humiliation and rage. Leora saw Novella crumble. She saw the cruelty in Catriona's eyes, a cruelty born of pain and powerlessness, lashed out at the weakest person in the room. Leora couldn't stop herself. The code she lived by, stay hidden, stay silent, stay safe, shattered under the weight of her loyalty to her friend. She stepped forward, moving Novella gently aside. Leora stood directly in front of the seated matriarch, blocking her view of the crying girl. Leora took a breath, her posture shifting, her shoulders squared, her chin lifted. The submissive waitress vanished. She spoke. "Zamolchi, staraya vedma, ti pozorish swojego syna I proshloje, kotoroje ti tako chayano pitajeshsia zaszczytit." Translation: Silence, old witch. You are shaming your son and the past you so desperately try to protect. The sound of the room didn't just stop, it died. It wasn't just that she spoke Russian, it was how she spoke it. It wasn't the standard Moscow dialect taught in universities. It was a guttural, specific dialect from the darker districts of St. Petersburg, laced with Fenya, the criminal argot used by the Bratva. the thieves-in-law, the old guard of the Russian mafia. It was a language of prisons and gulags, a dialect that hadn't been spoken openly in 20 years. It was the language of ghosts. Katriana dropped her fork. It clattered against the china, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Her mouth fell open, her face draining of color. The arrogance vanished, replaced by a shock so profound. She looked like she had seen a spectre. Zavran froze. He looked at Leora, his eyes wide, his predator's instinct suddenly confused by prey that bit back with the voice of a wolf. "What?" Katriana whispered, her voice trembling, the English failing her. "Katotai." "Who are you?" Leora didn't back down. She kept her gaze locked on the old woman, her expression steel. She switched back to English, but her tone remained commanding, authoritative, the tone of someone who sat at the head of the table, not someone who served it. "The venison is prepared medium rare, exactly as the chef intended," Leora said, her voice cool and terrifyingly calm. "If you wish for it to be cooked further, I will take it back. But you will not speak to my staff like that again, not in this house." Novella had stopped crying, staring at Leora as if she had grown wings. Merelda was clutching her clipboard so hard it snapped. Zavran stood up slowly. He towered over Leora. The danger radiating off him was palpable. He looked at his mother, who was clutching her chest, staring at Leora with a mixture of horror and recognition. Then he looked at Leora. "Where did you learn to speak that dialect?" Zavran asked, his voice low, dangerous. "That isn't something you pick up in school. That is Vori code." Leora realized what she had done. The adrenaline began to fade, replaced by the cold dread of exposure. She had revealed a card she was supposed to keep hidden until her death. "I picked up phrases here and there," Leora lied, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. "I watch a lot of movies." Zavran stepped closer, invading her personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne, gunpowder, and the fireweed tea she had brewed. He leaned down, his lips inches from her ear. "My mother hasn't heard that accent since her brother was executed in 98, Zavran whispered, "and the only people who spoke it were the ones holding the guns." "Who are you really, Leora?" Leora looked up at him, trapping his dark gaze with her own. "I'm just the waitress, Mr. Whitshaw. Do you want the check?" Zavran stared at her for a long, agonizing second. Then a slow, dark smile spread across his face. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a man who had just found a puzzle worth solving. "No," Zavran said, leaning back but keeping his eyes pinned to her. "Bring another bottle of wine. The night just got interesting." Katriana was still staring at Leora, her hands trembling on the tablecloth. She muttered one word in Russian, barely audible, but Leora heard it. "Kenyaginya, princess." Leora turned and walked toward the kitchen, her legs feeling like lead. She didn't look back, but she could feel Zavran's eyes burning a hole between her shoulder blades. She had saved Novella, but she had just painted a target on her own back. The cage was no longer gilded. It was locked, and she was trapped inside with the wolves. The silence that followed Leora's outburst was not the peaceful kind. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a bomb that had finished ticking but had not yet exploded. The rest of the dinner service blurred into a surreal high-wire act. Every time Leora stepped onto the floor, she felt the weight of a dozen gazes. Novella looked at her with teary-eyed worship. Merelda watched her with the suspicion of a warden who realizes a prisoner has a shiv. But it was table one that burned. Zavran Whitshaw did not eat. He drank his wine slowly, his dark eyes tracking Leora's every movement with the precision of a sniper. He was dissecting her, peeling back the layers of the waitress uniform to find the soldier underneath. Katriana, on the other hand, had fallen into a fugue state. She stared at the tablecloth, tracing patterns with a trembling finger, muttering in the old tongue. She wouldn't look at Leora again, but she wouldn't let anyone else serve the table either. When a busboy tried to clear the breadbasket, Katriana nearly took his hand off with her cane. When the last check was finally signed, Adrian Goldheart leaving a tip that could buy a small car, likely to buy silence about his earlier outbursts, the restaurant began to bleed out its patrons. The heavy oak doors groaned shut for the final time, sealing the staff inside the gilded cage. Leora retreated to the locker room, her hands finally beginning to shake. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving behind a cold, prickly fear. She stripped off the uniform, the fabric feeling like a second skin she was desperate to shed. She pulled on her street clothes, a thick, oversized sweater, dark jeans, and boots that were practical for running. She reached into her locker and pulled out her bag. Hidden in the lining was a burner phone and a passport that said her name was Elena Vance. Leora? She spun around, hand diving into her bag, fingers grazing the handle of the ceramic knife she kept there. It was Novella. The younger girl stood in the doorway, clutching her tips. I wanted to say thank you. No one has ever stood up to a customer for me. Especially not them. Leora relaxed, withdrawing her hand. You didn't deserve that, Nov. No one does. Merelda is in the office, Novella whispered, looking over her shoulder. She's on the phone with the owners. I think she's trying to figure out how to fire you without Zevran finding out. She's scared. Let her fire me, Leora said, swinging her bag over her shoulder. It would be the smartest thing she's ever done. Where did you learn to speak like that? Novella asked, her curiosity overriding her fear. It sounded ancient, like something from a movie. Movies, Leora repeated the lie, though it tasted like ash. Just movies, Nov. Go home. Lock your door. Leora didn't wait for a response. She bypassed the main staff exit, which spilled out into the well-lit employee parking lot, and instead headed for the delivery bay. It was a labyrinth of concrete corridors that smelled of rotting vegetables and bleach. She needed to disappear. If she could make it to the subway before Zevran's security detail did a sweep, she might have a chance to burn the Leora Faircrest identity and vanish before morning. She pushed open the heavy steel door to the alleyway. The night air was crisp, biting against her flushed skin. The alley was narrow, flanked by high brick walls that blocked out the city lights. It was a tunnel of shadows. Leora took 2 steps and froze. A single figure was leaning against the dumpster, the ember of a cigarette glowing like a demon's eye in the dark. I checked your file, a deep baritone voice rumbled from the shadows. Leora Faircrest, born in Ohio, community college dropout, no criminal record, previous employment at a diner in Jersey. Zevran Whitshaw stepped into the pale wash of the street lamp at the end of the alley. He dropped the cigarette and crushed it under the heel of his polished Oxford. It's a very boring story, Zevran said, walking slowly toward her. And it's entirely fake. Leora didn't run. Running would trigger the chase instinct. She stood her ground, shifting her weight to the balls of her feet. It's late, Mr. Whitshaw. The restaurant is closed. My mother is in the car. Zevran gestured vaguely to the mouth of the alley where a sleek black SUV idled silently. She's refusing to go home. She says she can't leave the princess behind. She thinks you're a ghost, Leora. Are you? I'm just a waitress who wants to go home, Leora said, her voice steady. A waitress who speaks Fenya. Zevran stopped 3 feet from her. He was taller than he looked in the dining room, a wall of muscle and expensive wool. Do you know what that dialect means to my family? It's the language of the Vori Vizakone, the thieves-in-law, specifically the St. Petersburg chapter that was liquidated in the late 90s. My uncle died speaking that dialect. My father died listening to it. I don't know what you're talking about, Leora lied. Stop lying, Zevran snapped, his voice losing its smooth veneer. He moved faster than a man his size should, pinning her against the brick wall. He didn't hurt her, but he caged her in, his arms on either side of her head. I had my tech run your face through the databases. Not the police ones. The real ones. Nothing. You're a ghost. Which means you're either very good at hiding or you're protected by someone very powerful. Leora looked up at him. Up close, his eyes weren't just dark. They were a kaleidoscope of violence and intelligence. He wasn't a thug. He was a king who suspected a usurper. If I were a threat, Leora whispered, your mother would be dead. I had access to her tea, her food, her space. If I wanted to hurt the Witcher family, I wouldn't have saved your dignity by silencing her tantrum. Zevran paused. The logic held. Then why? Why the show? Why reveal yourself? Because she was cruel, Leora said, the mask slipping just enough to show the fire underneath. And I hate bullies, even the ones wearing fur coats. Zevran stared at her, his breath hitching slightly. For a moment the interrogation wavered. He looked at her mouth, then back to her eyes. The tension shifted from threatening to something electric, charged with a dangerous chemistry. You're in danger, Zevran said, his voice dropping to a murmur. Yestin Morhart saw you. He saw you stand up to him, and he saw you stand up to my mother. Yestin is a paranoid psychopath. He'll think you're my secret weapon. He'll think you're a heavy. I can handle Yestin, Leora said. You have no idea what you're talking about, Zevran scoffed. You're coming with me. I'm not going anywhere with you. It wasn't a request, Zevran said, stepping back. Adrian Goldheart is already asking questions about the Russian girl. The rumors are spreading. If I let you walk away tonight, you'll be in a trunk by morning. And my mother. She won't forgive me if I let the princess die. Before Leora could respond, the sound of screeching tires tore through the air. A van swerved into the mouth of the alley, blocking the exit. The side door slid open. Zevran didn't hesitate. He grabbed Leora's wrist, pulling her behind him. Get down! But the men jumping out of the van weren't shooting. They were holding cameras. Paparazzi. No. They were holding phones, streaming. There she is, one of them shouted. The mystery woman. It was a distraction. While Zevran was focused on the intrusion, a shadow dropped from the fire escape above them. Leora sensed the displacement of air before she saw the movement. She shoved Zevran hard, sending him stumbling just as a crowbar swung through the space where his head had been. Leora spun, her leg lashing out in a high arc, her boot connecting with the attacker's wrist. Bone crunched. The crowbar clattered to the concrete. The attacker grunted, a massive man in a ski mask, and lunged for her. Leora didn't panic. She sidestepped, used his momentum, and drove her elbow into his solar plexus, followed by a palm strike to the nose. He went down like a sack of cement. Silence returned to the alley, save for the heavy breathing of the two of them. Zevran stared at the unconscious man, then at Leora. He looked at her stance, balanced, lethal, professional. Community college dropout, huh? Zevran said, wiping a speck of dust from his lapel. Leora straightened her sweater, her heart pounding. I took a self-defense class at the Y. Zevran laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Get in the car, Leora, before I have to carry you. This time she didn't argue. The interior of Zevran's SUV was silent as a tomb. The leather seats were soft, the windows tinted so dark the city outside was just a smear of neon and shadow. Leora sat in the back, squeezed between a stony-faced Zevran and a trembling Katriana. Katriana hadn't stopped staring at Leora since she entered the vehicle. The old woman's hands were clasped around the handle of her cane, her knuckles white. Every few minutes she would reach out, almost touching Leora's sleeve, before pulling back, as if afraid she would burn her fingers. "Where are we going?" Leora asked, breaking the silence. "A safe house," Zevran said without looking at her. He was typing furiously on his phone. Yestin made a move. That ambush in the alley wasn't a hit, it was a test. He wanted to see if I'd protect you. I did. Now you're marked. I handled the attacker, Leora pointed out. I didn't need your protection. You handled one, Zevran corrected. Yestin has an army, and now he knows you're combat trained. That makes you a soldier in his eyes, not a civilian. The rules of engagement have changed. The car wove through the city, leaving the high-end district for the industrial, sprawling outskirts. They pulled up to a converted warehouse that looked abandoned from the outside, but had security cameras blinking in every corner. The garage door rolled up, swallowing the car into the belly of the building. "Out!" Zevran commanded. The safe house was a fortress disguised as a loft. Exposed brick, steel beams, and furniture that cost more than Leora's life savings. It was beautiful and cold, much like Zevran himself. Katriana hobbled to a velvet armchair and collapsed into it. "Tea," she demanded, her voice weak, "with the memory of the wood stove." Zevran sighed, rubbing his temples. "I'll have the staff make it." "No!" Katriana slammed her cane down. "Her! The princess must make it. Only she knows the ratio." Zevran looked at Leora, an apology warring with exhaustion in his eyes. "The kitchen is fully stocked. Please, just pacify her while I figure out how to keep us all alive." Leora walked into the kitchen. It was a chef's dream: industrial stove, copper pots, marble counters. She found the tea quickly, her hands moving through the ritual on autopilot. As the water boiled, she looked at her reflection in the darkened window. She looked tired. The waitress was gone. The woman staring back was the one she had tried to bury. She brought the tea to Katriana. The old woman took the cup with shaking hands. "Sit," Katriana commanded, pointing to the ottoman at her feet. Leora sat. "Tai Vernulus," Katriana whispered. "You have returned." "I have not returned from anywhere, madame," Leora said softly. "I am just Leora." Katriana leaned forward, her eyes searching Leora's face. "You have her eyes, the same shape, the same coldness." "We thought the fire took everyone. The Vorontsov estate. 1998. The Winter Purge." Leora stiffened. Vorontsov. The name was a ghost story in the underworld. The Vorontsov family had been the royalty of the Russian mob, rivals to the Witchors, until their estate burned down in a mysterious fire that killed everyone, or so the story went. "I am from Ohio," Leora said, her voice tight. "Lies," Katriana spat, but without venom this time. "You speak the Fenya, you fight like a wolf, and you look at my son not with fear, but with assessment. Only a Vorontsov looks at a Witchor that way." "Mother, leave her alone." Zevran entered the room, having discarded his jacket. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing thick forearms corded with muscle. "We have a problem." He turned on a large flat-screen monitor on the wall. It showed a news feed. The obsidian was on fire. Leora gasped, standing up. "Novella?" "She's fine," Zevran said quickly. "The staff got out, but the message is clear. Yestin burned my territory because I embarrassed him and because I took you." "This is my fault," Leora whispered. "No," Zevran said, walking over to pour himself a drink. "This was coming for a long time. You were just the spark, but now we have a bigger issue. Yestin has called a Skodka." Katriana dropped her teacup. It shattered on the floor. "A Skodka? Here? In America?" "A meeting of the bosses," Zevran explained to Leora, though he suspected she already knew. "To settle the dispute. He's claiming I violated the truce by bringing a foreign agent, you, into the fold without declaring it. He thinks you're an assassin sent by the old families in Russia to reclaim territory." "Tell him I'm a waitress," Leora said. "He won't believe it, not after you broke a man's wrist in 3 seconds. Zevran took a sip of whiskey. "The meeting is tomorrow night. Neutral ground. I have to present you." "Present me?" Leora felt a cold chill. "As my asset," Zevran said. "Or as my fiancé?" Leora laughed, a harsh sound. "You're joking." "If you're my fiancé, you are family," Zevran said, his eyes dead serious. "Family is off limits. If you're an asset, Yestin can demand I hand you over as compensation for the insult. Which option do you prefer? Leora looked at Zevren. He was trapping her. It was a brilliant tactical trap. I prefer the option where I leave and you never see me again, Leora said. That option expired when you spoke Russian. Zevren stepped closer. If you leave, Yestin hunts you down. He will torture you to find out who sent you. He won't believe you're a nobody. Your only safety is behind me. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face. Let me protect you, Leora. Play the role one more time. And what happens when the play is over? Leora asked, looking up at him. Zevran's gaze dropped to her lips. Then we see if the characters survive. Katriana watched them from the chair, a strange, satisfied smile playing on her lips. The wolf and the raven, she muttered. Finally, the preparation for the Skodka was like preparing for a coronation and an execution simultaneously. Zevran's team, a group of silent, efficient men who looked like they were carved from granite, descended on the safe house. They brought weapons, tactical vests, and, for Leora, a dress. It was red. Not a polite crimson, but a violent, arterial red. It was silk, floor-length, with a slit that went up to her thigh and a back that plunged dangerously low. Wear it, Zevran said, tossing the garment bag onto the bed in the guest room where Leora had spent a sleepless night. Is this necessary? Leora asked, holding up the fabric. It looks like a target. It is, Zevran said. He was fastening a holster under his tuxedo jacket. Yestin expects weakness. He expects me to hide you, walking in with you in that dress. It's a power move. It says, I'm not afraid to show off what is mine. I am not yours, Leora said, disappearing behind the changing screen. For tonight you are, Zevran replied, and wear the heels. You'll need the height to look Yestin in the eye. When Leora emerged, Zevran stopped checking his gun. The room went quiet. The dress fit as if it had been sewn onto her body. It accentuated the lean muscle of her arms, the curve of her waist, and the dangerous scar behind her ear was now hidden by her hair, which had been styled in loose, glamorous waves. Zevran walked over to her. He didn't smile. He looked at her with a terrifying intensity. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a necklace. Diamonds. Cold, heavy diamonds. Turn around, he commanded. Leora turned. He clasped the necklace around her throat. His fingers lingered on her nape for a second too long. My mother's diamonds, Zevran whispered against her hair. The Vorontsov diamonds, actually. My father stole them as spoils of war. Leora froze. Why are you giving them to me? To see if Yestin recognizes them, Zevran said, turning her around to face him. And to see if you do. Leora looked at the diamonds in the mirror. She didn't recognize them, but she felt a strange, sickening pull towards them. A memory of light and fire. She pushed it down. Let's go, she said. The summit was held at an abandoned opera house in the decaying heart of the city. It was neutral ground, maintained by the Grey Council, a group of retired crime lords who arbitrated disputes. The atmosphere was thick with smoke and tension. The seats had been removed from the orchestra pit, replaced by a large round table. Yestin Morhart sat on one side, flanked by his lieutenants. He looked smug, spinning a knife on the table. When Zevran entered with Leora on his arm, the spinning stopped. Yestin's eyes went wide. He looked at the red dress, the diamonds, and the way Leora walked, head high, eyes sweeping the room for exits and threats. Well, well, Yestin sneered, standing up. The waitress cleans up nice. Zevran, I didn't know you were running a charity for hospitality staff. Sit down, Yestin, Zevran said, pulling out a chair for Leora. She sat, arranging the silk around her. Zevran took the seat next to her. "We are here to discuss the arson at my property," Zevran began, his voice echoing in the cavernous hall. "We are here," Yestin interrupted, slamming his hand on the table, "because you brought a foreign agent into our circle. Who is she, Zevran? GRUFSB, or just some freelance hitter you picked up?" "She is my fiancée," Zevran said calmly. Yestin laughed. "Fiancée? Since when? Since yesterday?" "Since I gave her the Vorontsov diamonds," Zevran gestured to Leora's neck. The room went deadly silent. The older men at the table, the grey council, leaned forward. They recognized the stones. Yestin's face darkened. "You're lying. Those stones were lost in the fire." "Evidently not," Zevran said. "Leora is under my protection. Any attack on her is an attack on the Witcher family, and by extension, an act of war against the Council's laws regarding family." Yestin looked at Leora. "Is that right, darling? You're marrying the butcher?" Leora looked at Yestin. She remembered the fear in Novella's eyes. She remembered the fire at the restaurant. "I'd rather marry the butcher than serve the pig," Leora said. Her voice was crystal clear. Yestin's face turned purple. He reached for his gun. Zevran was faster. His gun was on the table before Yestin cleared his holster. But Leora was faster than both of them. She didn't reach for a weapon. She reached for the water pitcher in the center of the table and shattered it against the edge. She held the jagged glass shard to the throat of Yestin's lieutenant, who had been leaning over to grab her. "Sit," Leora commanded in Fenya. "Sedet, ilia perereju, yemu glotku." "Sit, or I will cut his throat." The lieutenant froze. Yestin froze. Zevran looked at her, and for the first time he smiled, a genuine, terrifying smile. "I think," Zevran said, "the lady has made her position clear." But the victory was short-lived. From the shadows of the opera boxes above, a slow clap began. Everyone looked up. Standing on the balcony, looking down like a gargoyle, was a man. He wore a long coat and his face was scarred, half of it melted as if by fire. "Bravo!" the man called out. His voice was a rasping wheeze. "The daughter remembers the dialect. Katriana was right." Leora's blood ran cold. The glass shard trembled in her hand. "Who is that?" Zevran demanded, aiming his gun up. "That," Leora whispered, her voice breaking for the first time, "is the man who burned my house down." The man on the balcony leaned over. "Hello, Knyaginya. Daddy's home." The opera house erupted. It wasn't an explosion of fire, but of violence. At the sight of the scarred man, Viktor Vorontsov, the ghost of a dead dynasty, the fragile truce shattered like dropped crystal. "Kill them!" Yestin Moorhart screamed, flipping the heavy oak table. He scrambled back as bullets began to chew through the velvet upholstery of the chairs. Zevran didn't waste a second on shock. He grabbed Leora by the waist, hauling her behind a marble pillar just as the balcony above lit up with muzzle flashes. Victor's men were up there, raining suppression fire down on the pit. "He was supposed to be dead," Zevran roared over the deafening noise, checking the magazine of his pistol. "My father saw the body. They identified dental records." Leora was pressing herself against the cold stone, her chest heaving. The red dress was already ruined, torn at the hem where it had snagged on the debris. But her eyes were dry. The fear had evaporated, burned away by a cold, white-hot rage. "He faked it," Leora said, her voice cutting through the cacophony. "He burned us all to escape his debts to the cartel. He locked the doors from the outside. He watched us burn, Zevran. I only got out because I was small enough to fit through the laundry chute." Zevran looked at her, and for a moment the battle around them faded. He saw the little girl in the fire, and he saw the woman who had built a fortress around that trauma. "We move on 3, Zevran commanded, his face hardening into the mask of the wolf. "Back exit. My team is securing the perimeter, but we're cut off from the main SUV." "I can drive," Leora said, hiking up the skirt of her dress to free her legs. "Not in those heels," Zevran retorted. Leora kicked them off without hesitation, standing barefoot on the dust-covered floor. "Try me." They moved. Zevran provided cover fire, his aim supernatural even in the chaos. He took down 2 of Yestin's men, who tried to flank them. Leora moved like a shadow, low and fast. When a 3rd gunman emerged from the wings, Leora didn't wait for Zevran. She grabbed a discarded mic stand, swinging it with the precision of a bow staff. The heavy iron base connected with the gunman's temple with a sickening crunch. He dropped instantly. They burst out the rear stage door into the cool, dry night air. The alleyway was a choke point. Zevran's backup vehicle, a matte grey sedan, screeched around the corner, driven by his head of security. "Get in!" the driver shouted. As they scrambled into the back seat, the rear windshield shattered. Victor was standing on the fire escape above, a long-range rifle in his hands. He wasn't shooting to kill. He was shooting to disable. "Drive!" Zevran ordered. The car tore onto the main road, weaving through traffic. Leora looked back. She saw her father lowered the rifle, a twisted smile visible even from the distance. He let them go. It was a game to him, cat and mouse. "He's not working with Yestin," Leora said, catching her breath as the city lights blurred past. "Yestin looked just as terrified as we were. Victor is a 3rd party. He's here to burn it all down." "He called you Kniaginya," Zevran said, wiping a smear of soot from his cheek. He looked at Leora with a new kind of reverence. "You are the heir to the Vorontsov Empire. If the old families in Russia find out you're alive, the balance of power shifts. You aren't just a waitress, Leora. You're a queen in exile." "I don't want a kingdom," Leora snapped, tearing the diamond necklace from her throat. It felt heavy, like a collar. "I want him dead." "He will be," Zevran promised, reaching out to cover her hand with his. His skin was rough, warm and grounding. "But first, we need to survive the night. Yestin will be hunting us to sell us to your father. And your father, he wants his princess back to legitimize his return." They drove in silence to a location Zevran claimed didn't exist on any map. It was an old underground bunker beneath the city's dry docks, a relic of the Cold War that the Witchers had repurposed. When they arrived, Katriana was already there, having been moved from the loft the moment the shooting started. She sat on a crate, looking frail but fierce. When she saw Leora, she stood up, leaning heavily on her cane. "Victor," Katriana whispered. It wasn't a question. "He's alive," Leora confirmed, walking into the harsh fluorescent light of the bunker. "And he's insane." Katriana let out a long, shuddering breath. "I knew the devil couldn't die by fire. He was born in it." She looked at Leora, really looked at her, and bowed her head slightly, a gesture of submission she had never shown anyone, not even her own son. "I am sorry, child, for the tea, for the cruelty. I did not know I was speaking to a survivor of the flames." Leora looked at the old woman. "Apology accepted. Now, tell me where his safe houses used to be. A creature like him doesn't change his habits. He returns to his nests." The bunker became a war room. Maps were spread across makeshift tables. Zevran's network of spies, street kids, hackers, corrupt cops began feeding them information. The city was in chaos. Yestin Morhart's crew was tearing apart the lower districts looking for them. But there were reports of a 3rd faction, men in black tactical gear, moving with military precision, taking out Yestin's safe houses one by one. "Victor is cleaning house," Zevran said, studying a map of the harbour. "He's eliminating the competition so he can claim the throne uncontested. He's doing Yestin's job for him, and Yestin is too stupid to realize he's next." Leora stood by the weapon rack, loading a fresh magazine into a Glock 19. She had traded the ruined red dress for tactical gear found in the bunker's lockers, black cargo pants, a fitted combat shirt, and heavy boots. She looked every inch the soldier Zevran had accused her of being. He's heading for the water treatment plant, Leora said suddenly, pointing to a spot on the map. Zevran looked up. Why there? It's abandoned. It's not abandoned, Leora said, her eyes distant. Beneath the main turbine hall there's a vault. My grandfather built it. It's where the Vorontsov family kept the obshchak, the common treasury. Gold, bonds, blackmail material on half the Senate. Victor needs money to pay his mercenaries. He's going to the vault. If he gets that money, he buys the city, Zevran realized. We have to beat him there. It's a trap, Katriana warned from her corner. He knows you know. He is baiting you, Knyaginya. I know, Leora said, chambering around. The sound was loud in the concrete room. But he thinks I'm still the little girl who hid in the laundry chute. He thinks I'll be afraid of the dark. He's wrong. Zevran walked over to her. He motioned for his men to give them a moment. The room cleared, leaving only the hum of the ventilation fans. You don't have to do this, Zevran said softly. We can leave. I have accounts in the Caymans, safe houses in Tokyo. We can disappear. Let them kill each other. Leora looked up at him. The connection between them was undeniable now. It had been forged in adrenaline and tempered by truth. She reached up, touching the side of his face. I spent 10 years running, Zevran. I pretended to be invisible. I let people like Mirelda and Yestin treat me like dirt because I was afraid of being seen. But you saw me. Zevran turned his face into her palm, kissing the center of her hand. I saw you the moment you walked into my restaurant 3 months ago. Why do you think I sat in your section every Thursday? It wasn't for the risotto. Leora smiled, a small, genuine thing. We can't run. If we leave, he burns the city. He hurts people like Novella. I have to finish this. Then we finish it together, Zevran said. He pulled her close, his other hand tangling in her hair. But know this. I am not fighting for the city. I am not fighting for the crown. I am fighting for you. He kissed her then. It wasn't a tentative first kiss. It was desperate, hungry, a claim staked in the face of impending death. Leora kissed him back with equal force, pouring all the years of silence and suppression into the contact. For a moment, they weren't a mafia boss and a lost princess. They were just two people finding an anchor in a storm. When they broke apart, breathless, Zevran rested his forehead against hers. When this is over, I'm taking you on a real date. Somewhere with no tablecloths and cheap burgers. Deal, Leora whispered. The door banged open. Zevran's lieutenant stood there looking pale. Boss, we have movement. Yestin's convoy is heading to the water treatment plant, and Victor's men are already there waiting. It's time, Zevran said, pulling away from Leora but keeping her hand in his. Let's go crash the family reunion. They moved out. The convoy of black SUVs tore through the night, a line of predators hunting a monster. Leora sat in the passenger seat, checking her weapon. She wasn't afraid anymore. The fear had been replaced by an icy clarity. She knew exactly what she had to say to her father, and she knew exactly which dialect she would use to say it. The water treatment plant was a cavern of rust and shadows. Zevran's team swept the catwalk silently, but Leora marched straight down the center aisle of the turbine hall. Yestin Morhart was already on his knees, bloodied and beaten, his empire dismantled in an hour. Standing over him was Viktor Vorontsov, his scarred face twisted in a grin as he saw Leora emerge from the dark. Elena! Victor spread his arms wide, ignoring Zevran's gun trained on his chest. You've come to help your father claim his inheritance. My name is Leora, she said, stepping into the light, and I'm here to close the account. Open the vault, girl, Victor sneered, gesturing to the massive steel door behind him. The combination is your birthday. Inside is enough gold to buy this city and bury the Witchshaws. Leora didn't hesitate. She walked past him, punched in the code 102488, and the hydraulics hissed. As the heavy door groaned open, Victor shoved Yestin aside and sprinted toward the dark moor, blinded by greed. "Everything is mine!" Victor shouted, rushing inside. "The kingdom is—" He froze. The vault was empty, just a single wooden chair and a tape recorder in the center of the concrete room. "Grandfather didn't trust you," Leora's voice echoed from the doorway. She stood by the control panel, her hand on the lever. "He moved the treasury before you burned the house. You killed them for nothing." Victor spun around, horror dawning on his face. "No, I am your father." "I have no father," Leora replied in perfect, chilling Fenya. "I have only a memory, and I am burning it." She slammed the lever down. The steel door surged forward. Victor screamed, lunging for the exit, but Zevran fired 3 rounds at his feet, forcing him back. The door slammed shut with a boom that shook the building, sealing Victor inside his concrete tomb forever. Silence fell. Leora looked down at a terrifyingly pale Yestin. "Run," she commanded. "If I see you in my city again, you join him." Yestin scrambled away without looking back. Leora finally sagged, the adrenaline crashing, but Zevran was there instantly, pulling her into his arms. "It's over," he whispered, holding her tight. "You're safe." "He's gone," Leora breathed, burying her face in his chest. "Let's go home," Zevran said, kissing the top of her head. "I owe you a burger." The morning sun hit the pavement outside the Obsidian, which was currently surrounded by scaffolding. The fire damage was being repaired, but inside, the kitchen was already buzzing. Leora sat at table 1, not serving it, sitting at it. Across from her sat Zevran, reading the morning paper, and next to him sat Katriana. "The tea is cold," Katriana complained, poking at her cup. Leora didn't flinch. She picked up the teapot, poured the cold tea into the slop bowl, and poured a fresh, steaming cup. She slid it over to the matriarch. "It's hot now, Katriana," Leora said calmly. "Drink it before I tell Zevran about the time you tried to bribe the health inspector." Zevran choked on his coffee, hiding a smile behind the newspaper. Katriana glared at Leora, but there was no malice in it, only respect. She took a sip. "It is acceptable," Katriana grumbled. Then she looked at Leora. "Pass the sugar, Kniaginya." Leora smiled. She passed the sugar. She wasn't the waitress anymore. She wasn't just the princess either. She was Leora. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't hiding. The city outside was loud, dangerous, and chaotic. But in here, in the obsidian dark of the restaurant, everything was exactly as it should be. And that is how the quiet waitress silenced a mafia queen and buried a king. Leora didn't just survive the underworld, she rewrote the rules. From pouring wine to pouring concrete over her past, she proved that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one you overlook. If you enjoyed this story of hidden identities, mafia romance, and justice served cold, please hit that like button. It helps the channel immensely. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Share this with a friend who loves a good plot twist. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.